The dust settled on the arena floor of Zephara's Grand Centurion Coliseum, a massive structure that could house 50,000 spectators from across the galaxy. Today, it held twice that number, bodies pressed against each other in anticipation of the historic 100th battle. Blood from 99 previous victories stained the sand beneath Silas's feet, turning it a rusty brown that matched the twin suns setting beyond the open dome. Silas stood alone in the center of the arena, his chest heaving, muscles trembling from exhaustion that ran bone-deep. He was tall for an earthling, with dark hair matted with sweat and blood against his forehead. 100 days of combat had hardened his already lean frame into something almost inhuman, a weapon forged in the crucible of the Centurion trials. From her royal viewing box, Tiessa watched him with an intensity that had grown over the past 99 battles. As the daughter of Arena Master Korath, she had seen countless warriors fight and die, but none like this Earth slave. He fought not with the desperation of the condemned, nor with the practiced brutality of professional killers, but with a quiet dignity that seemed utterly out of place in this monument to violence. "The final challenger approaches," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, amplified by technology that made it reverberate in the bones of every spectator. "Behold Zeon, former champion of the Valoran Elite Guard, winner of 327 sanctioned battles." A massive figure emerged from the opposite gate, easily 7 feet tall and covered in the ceremonial black armor of the Valoran military elite. Zeon removed his helmet to reveal a scarred face with cybernetic enhancements glowing beneath his skin. "This slave has survived 99 battles," Arena Master Korath declared, rising from his throne beside Tiessa. His voice carried the authority of law in the arena. "By the ancient laws of the Centennial Trial, should he defeat this final challenger, he earns the right to choose his reward, freedom or the hand of royal blood." The crowd roared its approval. It had been decades since anyone had survived to claim either prize. Tiessa's hands gripped the golden railing of the royal box, her knuckles turning white. Zeon circled Silas slowly, his energy blade humming with lethal promise. "A slave who thinks himself worthy of freedom," he spat. "Or perhaps you think yourself worthy of royal flesh?" Silas said nothing. He never spoke during battles. His silence had become as much a part of his legend as his fighting prowess. "Begin," Korath commanded, and the arena erupted in cheers. Zeon attacked with blinding speed, his blade slicing through the air where Silas had stood a moment before. The Earth slave moved with practiced efficiency, conserving energy, making each step count. 99 battles had taught him patience. They had taught him to read opponents who were stronger, faster, and better armed. "Fight back, slave!" Zeon growled, launching a series of attacks that forced Silas to retreat. For 20 minutes, they danced across the arena floor, Zeon attacking relentlessly while Silas evaded, studied, and waited. The crowd grew restless, some booing the lack of bloodshed. Then, in a single moment, everything changed. Zeon overextended on a thrust, and Silas moved inside his guard. What followed was not a prolonged exchange, but a precise sequence of strikes that leveraged the former champion's momentum against him. Silas struck at joints, nerve clusters, and the exposed circuits of Zeon's cybernetic enhancements. The Valoran champion fell to his knees, his weapon skittering across the sand. Silas stood over him, a primitive blade, fashioned from the armor of a fallen opponent, pressed against Zeon's throat. The arena fell silent. "Finish him," someone shouted, and the cry was taken up by thousands. Silas looked up at the royal box, his eyes finding Tiessa's. Something passed between them, a question, perhaps, or a promise. He lowered his blade. "I claim victory without death," Silas declared, his voice hoarse from disuse but clear enough to be heard throughout the arena. It was the first time many had heard him speak. Arena Master Korath stood, his expression unreadable. "The law allows it," he conceded. "The challenger lives, but the trial is complete. Silas of Earth has survived the centennial trial." The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and angry shouts. Some had hoped for a bloody finish, but others respected the display of mercy, something rarely seen in the Centurion Colosseum. Korath raised his hand for silence. "Approach the royal box to claim your prize, Victor." Guards escorted Silas to the central platform, which rose to bring him level with the royal viewing area. For the first time, he and Thaisa were separated by mere feet rather than the vast distance of the arena floor to the highest seats. By the laws of the Centennial Trial, established 3,000 years ago when Emperor Valox the Great founded this arena, you may claim one of two rewards. Korath announced. Freedom, with safe passage to any world within the Valoran Empire. Or... He gestured to Thaisa, who stood tall and proud beside him. The hand of royal blood, which brings with it title, land, and position within the royal court. The crowd fell silent, awaiting Silas's choice. It was traditional for victors to choose royal marriage. Freedom alone offered little to one who had no home to return to, while royal status provided power and protection. Thaisa's eyes never left Silas's face. She had watched him fight for 100 days, had seen him spare opponents when he could have killed them, had witnessed his quiet dignity in the face of humiliation and pain. What she saw in him was something her world of rigid hierarchy and brutal tradition sorely lacked. Silas looked at her, truly looked at her, then turned to face the crowd. "I choose neither," he said. Gasps echoed throughout the arena. Arena Master Korath stepped forward. "You must choose one. It is the law." "Then I choose freedom," Silas replied. "But I want no safe passage, no title, no land. Just freedom, my own body belonging to myself alone." The declaration sent shockwaves through the Colosseum. Slaves were property. To claim ownership of one's body was to challenge the very foundation of the Valoran Empire. "You refuse the hand of royal blood?" Korath demanded, his face darkening with rage and embarrassment. "You refuse my daughter." Silas turned to Thaisa. "I refuse to claim any person as a prize," he said quietly. "Even one as worthy as your daughter." Thaisa's eyes widened. In all her 22 years, no one had ever spoken of her as a person rather than a possession, a political asset, or a symbol of royal power. "The law says you must accept a reward," Korath insisted. "Then I have stated my terms for freedom," Silas replied. "Grant me personhood under Valoran law, and I will consider the debt paid." The arena master's face contorted with fury. "Take him to the holding cells," he ordered the guards. "The Emperor will decide his fate." As they led Silas away, his eyes met Thaisa's one final time. What passed between them in that moment would change the course of galactic history. The royal palace of Zephyra buzzed with scandalous whispers. Princess Thaisa, daughter of Arena Master Korath and niece to Emperor Vorak himself, had been publicly rejected by a slave. The humiliation was unprecedented. "You should remain in your chambers until this passes," her handmaiden advised, as she prepared Thaisa for the evening banquet that traditionally followed the completion of a centennial trial. "I will not hide," Thaisa replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within her. "A rejection implies I was offered. I was not. I was treated as a prize to be claimed." And he refused to participate in that tradition. The handmaiden looked shocked. "My lady, you speak dangerously." Thaisa rose from her seat, her ceremonial robes flowing around her like liquid silver. "Perhaps it's time for dangerous words." The banquet hall fell silent when she entered. Hundreds of nobles from across the Valoran Empire watched her approach the high table where her father sat with Emperor Vorak. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their scorn. "Niece," Emperor Vorak greeted her with a kiss on each cheek. He was a tall, imposing figure with the same golden eyes as Tiesa, though his had hardened with decades of absolute rule. "You bear this unfortunate situation with grace." "There is nothing to bear, uncle," she replied. "The Earth Slave made a choice that honors us all by challenging traditions that perhaps deserve questioning." A murmur ran through the assembled guests. Arena Master Korath gripped his goblet so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Careful, daughter," he warned quietly. "Your words border on sedition." "What has happened to the slave?" she asked, ignoring his warning. Emperor Vorak waved a hand dismissively. "He awaits judgment. The law is unclear on one who refuses both traditional rewards." "The law is perfectly clear," came a new voice. Commander Kira stepped forward from among the military officials present at the banquet. She was one of the youngest commanders in the Valoran fleet. Her rise through the ranks as meteoric as it was controversial. "The centennial trial laws state that the victor must be given what they choose, provided it falls within the boundaries of the two traditional rewards. And he chose freedom with specific terms," Tiesa added. "Terms that undermine the very foundation of our empire," Korath growled. Emperor Vorak studied his niece with newfound interest. "You defend the slave who rejected you?" "I defend the law," Tiesa replied. "And a warrior who earned his reward through blood and courage." The emperor leaned back in his throne, his expression unreadable. "The law will be considered," he said finally. "But not tonight. Tonight we celebrate the completion of another centennial trial. Let the festivities begin." Music filled the hall as servants brought out elaborate dishes from a dozen worlds. Dancers performed traditional Valoran war dances, their movements telling the story of imperial conquest across the stars. But Tiesa barely noticed any of it. Her mind was in the holding cells beneath the arena where Silas awaited his fate. As the night wore on, she slipped away from the high table, making her way through the labyrinthine palace toward the underground passages that connected to the arena. Her knowledge of these secret pathways, learned during a childhood spent exploring every corner of her father's domain, served her well now. The guard at the holding cell entrance straightened when he saw her approach. "Princess Tiesa, you should not be here." "I wish to see the victor of the centennial trial," she said, her voice carrying the authority she had been raised to wield. "It is my right as the offered prize to look upon the one who rejected me." The guard hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, my lady." But briefly, the cells were clean but sparse, designed to hold warriors rather than common criminals. Silas sat on a simple bench, his wounds treated but his body still bearing the marks of 100 battles. He stood when she entered, his eyes wary but unafraid. "You should not have come," he said quietly. "I needed to understand," she replied, dismissing the guard with a gesture. When they were alone, she continued, "Why did you refuse both rewards? Freedom with safe passage would have given you a new life. A new life in a system that treats people as property." Silas shook his head. "What kind of freedom is that?" "And me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Was I so undesirable a prize? A ghost of a smile touched Silas's lips. "You were watching me for 100 days. Did you think I wasn't watching you too?" Tiesa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You saw me?" "Every day. I saw how you flinched when warriors died needlessly. I saw your eyes when your father announced particularly cruel match conditions. I saw a person trapped in tradition just as surely as I was trapped in that arena." He stepped closer to the energy barrier that separated them. "You were never undesirable, princess. You were unreachable in the only way that matters." "What way is that?" "As an equal," he said simply. "And I would never accept any person, especially one I've come to admire, as a reward for violence." The word struck Tiesa like a physical blow. Equal. No one in her life had ever considered her an equal. She was either above them by virtue of her royal blood, or beneath them due to her gender in the patriarchal Valoran hierarchy. "They're going to kill you," she whispered. "Not directly, not after your victory. But there are those who cannot allow the precedent you've set to stand." Silas nodded. "I know. I've heard the guards talking. There's to be an escape attempt tonight that will end with my unfortunate death. How can you be so calm?" He shrugged. "I've faced death 100 times in that arena. The only difference now is that I'll die having spoken truth rather than having lived a lie." Tiessa made a decision then, one that had been forming in her mind since she'd witnessed his final victory. "You won't die tonight," she said. "I won't allow it." Before Silas could respond, she turned and left the cell area, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. She had watched him fight for survival for 100 days. Now it was her turn to fight for him. Returning to her chambers, Tiessa dismissed her handmaidens and activated the privacy field that would prevent surveillance, a precaution all royals employed when discussing sensitive matters. Then she touched the communication panel embedded in her jewelry. "Captain Vex," she said when a holographic image appeared before her, "I need your assistance with a matter of justice and law." Captain Vex was one of her father's younger officers, a man whose reputation for strict adherence to legal protocols had both hindered and protected his career. "Princess," he replied, bowing, "how may I serve?" "Tonight there will be an attempt to circumvent the Emperor's justice through an assassination disguised as an escape attempt. I need you to ensure the Centennial Trial victor receives the full protection of law until the Emperor renders judgment." Vex's expression revealed nothing, but Tiessa knew he understood the implications. "That would require deploying my personal guard to supplement the arena security," he said carefully, "which might be seen as overstepping my authority." "I will take full responsibility," Tiessa assured him. "And Captain, this must be done quietly." "Of course. Princess." The hologram flickered out. Tiessa then accessed her secure terminal, searching through the ancient legal archives that contained the complete text of the Centennial Trial laws. If she was going to defend Silas, she needed to know every letter of the law that protected him. 3 hours past midnight, the assassination attempt came as predicted. What the conspirators didn't expect was Captain Vex's elite squad positioned strategically throughout the holding area, or Tiessa herself concealed in an observation room, recording everything. 4 hooded figures disabled the regular guards with stun weapons before approaching Silas's cell. They deactivated the energy barrier. "Time to escape. Slave," one said with mock encouragement. "Make a run for it." Silas remained seated on his bench. "I think not." The leader drew a blade. "Then we'll have to make it look good another way." Before he could strike, the lights flared to full brightness and Vex's team moved in with precision. The would-be assassins found themselves surrounded, their weapons neutralized by localized energy-dampening fields. "By order of Princess Tiessa, representing the Emperor's justice, you are detained for attempted murder and interference with the Centennial Trial proceedings," Captain Vex announced, stepping into view. The leader of the assassins laughed bitterly. "You've overstepped. Captain, do you know who sent us?" "I know precisely who sent you," Tiessa said, emerging from the observation room. "And I have recorded evidence of both the attempt and the admission that you were sent by someone in authority." She approached Silas's cell, where he still sat calmly. "The law protects you until the Emperor's judgment," she told him, "but you're not safe here." "What are you suggesting?" Silas asked. Tiessa turned to Captain Vex. "Prepare a secure transport. The victor of the Centennial Trial is being moved to the Imperial Justice Center pending the Emperor's decision." "There is no transport authorization," Vex pointed out. Tiessa removed a royal seal from her robe. "There is now." Within an hour, Silas found himself aboard a sleek transport vessel, Tiessa and Captain Vex accompanying him along with a small security detail of officers loyal to Vex. This isn't the way to the Justice Center, Silas observed as they cleared Zephyra's atmosphere. No, Tiessa agreed. It's the way to New Haven Station. From there, we can reach allies who believe in the reforms the Valoran Empire desperately needs. Silas studied her with new appreciation. You're risking everything. I'm fighting for what's right, she corrected him. Something you taught me by example over 100 days. Captain Vex approached them, his expression grave. Princess, we've been hailed by your father's flagship. They're demanding we return to Zephyra immediately. Decline politely. Tiessa instructed. Inform them we are executing direct orders related to the Centennial Trial and will report to the Emperor upon completion of our mission. That will only buy us hours at most, Vex warned. Hours are all we need to reach New Haven, Tiessa replied. She turned to Silas. There's something you should know. The rebellion isn't just scattered malcontents as the Imperial propaganda suggests. It's an organized resistance with supporters even within the royal court and military. Like you and Captain Vex, Silas noted. Vex straightened. I support the law, not rebellion. But when the law is twisted to serve tyranny rather than justice, following the true spirit of the law becomes an act of resistance. We need your help, Tiessa told Silas. Your victory and your claim to own yourself has already spread across the Empire's communication networks. You've become a symbol. Silas shook his head. I'm just a man who wanted to be free. Sometimes that's all a revolution needs. Tiessa replied. A simple truth spoken in a place where lies have ruled for too long. The journey to New Haven Station was tense but uneventful. The massive space station orbited a neutral territory at the edge of Valoran's space. Technically within the Empire, but with enough autonomous governance to provide some shelter from Imperial decree. As they docked, Commander Kira, who had spoken at the banquet, was waiting for them. You've caused quite the diplomatic incident, Princess, she said by way of greeting. I'm preventing a miscarriage of justice, Tiessa replied. Kira nodded to Silas. The victor of the Centennial Trial, your statement has been transmitted to every corner of the Empire. Did you know that 3 slave uprisings have already begun on mining colonies in the Outer Reach? Silas looked troubled. I didn't call for violence. Freedom often requires it, Kira said grimly. But we have a chance to channel this energy into something more lasting than a bloody insurrection. Follow me. She led them through service corridors to avoid the main concourse where Imperial agents might be watching. They eventually reached a secure conference room where several people waited, a mix of military personnel, civilians in expensive attire suggesting merchant-class status, and a few rough-looking individuals who could only be rebel operatives. This is Jonas. Kira introduced a weather-beaten man with cybernetic implants visible at his temples. Leader of the Freedom Collective in the Outer Reach. Jonas studied Silas with intensity. So you're the arena fighter who refused to play by their rules. Good. We need people who think beyond the boundaries they've set for us. Over the next hours, Silas learned about the resistance movement that had been building for decades throughout the Valoran Empire. What had begun as isolated protests against labor conditions in the mining colonies had evolved into a sophisticated network fighting for fundamental reforms. The Empire isn't evil at its core, explained Jonas. It brought stability to thousands of worlds after the Chaos Wars, but its reliance on slave labor and rigid hierarchies belongs to a bygone era. What exactly do you want from me? Silas asked. Tiessa stepped forward. We want you to continue being exactly what you were in that arena, a symbol of dignity who refuses to accept that some people are property and others are prizes. The difference, added Commander Kira, is that now you'll have protection and a platform. Before Silas could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Captain Vex checked the security feed on his wrist device. Imperial forces have docked at 3 separate locations, he reported. They're claiming to be conducting a standard inspection, but their numbers suggest otherwise. They're here for us, Tiessa said. Jonas activated a hidden panel in the wall, revealing an arsenal of weapons. "We have an extraction plan. There's a merchant vessel waiting at Docking Bay 37. "Wait." Silas held up his hand. "More violence won't solve this. There has to be another way." "What do you suggest?" Kira asked skeptically. "Surrender and hope for the Emperor's mercy?" "No," Silas replied. "I suggest we use their laws against them, just as we've been doing. The Centennial Trial victor has certain rights that even the Emperor must respect, at least publicly." "He's right," Tiessa realized. "If they kill him now, after the recording of the assassination attempt has been distributed, it would trigger exactly the kind of widespread rebellion they're trying to prevent." "So what's your plan?" Jonas demanded. Silas looked at Tiessa. "We need to reach the one place where tradition and law intersect, the Tower of Tradition on Nexus Prime. The seat of the Imperial Court of Justice," Tiessa breathed. "Where even the Emperor must abide by the ancient laws or risk losing legitimacy." "Exactly," Silas nodded. "But we'll need to get there ahead of your father's forces." Jonas grinned. "Now that we can help with." What followed was a daring race across 3 star systems. While Arena Master Korath's forces searched New Haven Station, Silas, Tiessa, and a small team including Captain Vex and Commander Kira slipped away aboard a modified merchant vessel capable of speeds that belied its humble appearance. They encountered Imperial patrols twice, but Commander Kira's military codes and quick thinking got them through both checkpoints. The third encounter, however, ended in a firefight that damaged their engines and forced them to make an emergency landing on a mining moon. "We need repairs," Jonas reported grimly after assessing the damage. "And we've got maybe 3 hours before Imperial forces track us here." "I can help with that," came a new voice. A dust-covered figure emerged from behind a pile of ore containers. "Name's Dr. Alani. I run the medical facility for the miners here. But I was a starship engineer before the Empire decided my political views made me better suited for exile. With Dr. Alani's expertise and the assistance of several miners who recognized Silas from contraband recordings of the Centennial Trial, they managed to repair the ship just as Imperial scouts appeared on the horizon." "Go," Dr. Alani urged them as they prepared to depart. "What you're doing gives hope to all of us." Their final approach to Nexus Prime required navigating through the heart of Imperial space to avoid detection. Commander Kira suggested a daring strategy, broadcasting Imperial emergency codes that would clear a path through the defensive grid. "If we're caught, it's treason," Captain Vex pointed out. "If we fail, it's worse than treason," Tiessa replied. "It's the death of hope for millions." The gambit worked. They landed at a secondary spaceport on Nexus Prime, the heart of the Valoran Empire and home to the Tower of Tradition, a massive structure of crystalline material that housed the records of every law and precedent established since the founding of the Empire. "We need to reach the Chamber of Ancient Rites," Tiessa explained as they made their way through the less monitored service tunnels beneath the capital city. "Once there, Silas can formally invoke the right of trial completion before witnesses. Even my father and the Emperor would be bound by that." "What exactly does this right of trial completion entail?" Silas asked. "It means that once you've fulfilled the requirements of the Centennial Trial, your chosen reward becomes sacrosanct under Imperial law," Tiessa explained. "No power in the Empire can deny it without undermining the very traditions that give the Empire its legitimacy. And since you chose freedom with a specific condition of personhood," Captain Vex continued, "it establishes a legal precedent that could be applied to every slave in the Empire," Commander Kira finished. Jonas looked impressed. "You're not just seeking personal freedom. You're trying to change the fundamental legal status of slaves throughout the galaxy." Silas nodded. "It was always about more than just me." Their infiltration of the Tower of Tradition nearly succeeded without incident. Using Tiessa's royal access codes and Captain Vex's military clearance, They managed to reach the upper levels where the Chamber of Ancient Rites was located. But as they approached the final security checkpoint, they found Arena Master Korath waiting with a full complement of Imperial guards. "Daughter," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "you have committed treason against your family, your emperor, and your empire. I have upheld the law when others sought to pervert it." Thyessa replied, standing tall beside Silas. "The Centennial Trial victor earned his reward, and you attempted to have him murdered rather than honor the ancient traditions." Korath's eyes narrowed. "You have recordings? Witnesses? It would be your word against mine, and I am Arena Master." "That's where you're wrong," came another voice. Commander Kira stepped forward, activating a holographic projector that displayed the attempted assassination in the holding cell. "I transmitted this evidence to every member of the Imperial Court of Justice the moment it happened, along with a complete legal brief on the right of trial completion," added Captain Vex. Korath's face contorted with rage. "Guards, arrest them all for sedition!" The guards hesitated, looking between Korath and the evidence still playing in holographic form. "The law is clear. Arena Master," Captain Vex said formally. "Interference with the Centennial Trial outcomes is itself sedition under Imperial Statute 793. "Stand aside, Father," Thyessa said quietly. "Let justice be served." For a moment, it seemed Korath might order the guards to attack anyway. Then a new voice echoed through the chamber. "Indeed, let justice be served." Emperor Vorak himself emerged from the Chamber of Ancient Rites, his imperial robes flowing around him, his face impassive as he surveyed the standoff. "Uncle." Thyessa bowed respectfully but did not lower her eyes. "Niece," the Emperor acknowledged. "You have caused quite the disturbance in my empire." "I have sought to uphold its most sacred laws," she countered. Emperor Vorak turned his attention to Silas. "And you, Centennial Champion, you have survived 100 battles, only to launch yourself into political warfare even more dangerous." Silas met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. "I seek only what I earned, freedom and recognition of my personhood under Valoran law. A simple request that would fundamentally transform our entire economic and social structure," Vorak observed dryly. "Nothing is ever as simple as it seems." He gestured toward the Chamber of Ancient Rites. "I have reviewed the laws myself. They are, unfortunately for my brother-in-law, quite clear. The victor of the Centennial Trial must receive their chosen reward, provided it falls within the boundaries established by tradition." Korath stepped forward. "Majesty, surely you cannot—" "Cannot what?" Vorak cut him off. "Cannot uphold the very laws that give me my authority. The moment I ignore our most sacred traditions when they become inconvenient is the moment I invite every subject in the Empire to do the same." He turned back to Silas and Thyessa. "The Court of Justice has reviewed your petition. The right of trial completion is acknowledged and granted." A stunned silence fell over the assembled group. "However," the Emperor continued, "the implementation of this right, specifically the recognition of personhood for all those currently classified as property, will require significant legal and economic adjustments. These cannot happen overnight without causing chaos." "What are you proposing, Uncle?" Thyessa asked cautiously. "A commission," Emperor Vorak replied, "led by you and your Centennial Champion, to develop a phased implementation plan for the recognition of personhood rights. Captain Vex and Commander Kira will provide military and legal expertise. In the meantime, I am issuing an imperial decree suspending all punishment of slaves for insubordination and halting all slave trading effective immediately." It wasn't everything they had hoped for, but it was a beginning. A crack in the foundation of an unjust system that could be widened over time. "And what of the Freedom Collective?" Jonas asked boldly. "Those who have been fighting for these changes for decades?" The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Amnesty for past actions, in exchange for participation in the commission and a cessation of violent activities. We accept, Silas said before Jonas could respond. He looked at the rebel leader. We can accomplish more through this opportunity than through 1,000 armed rebellions. Jonas didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded his agreement. Then it is settled, Emperor Vorak declared. The Zephyra Freedom Alliance is hereby established with imperial sanction. He turned to Arena Master Korath. Brother, your position is suspended pending an investigation into the attempted assassination of the Centennial Champion. Korath's face darkened with fury, but with Imperial guards surrounding them, he could only bow stiffly and step aside. As they entered the Chamber of Ancient Rites to formalize the agreement, Tiessa moved close to Silas. This isn't how I expected this to end, she admitted quietly. It's not an ending, Silas replied. It's a beginning. He hesitated, then added, I've been fighting for survival for so long. I'm not sure I know how to live for something more. Tiessa's hand found his. Then we'll learn together. Not as property and owner, not as prize and victor, but as equals. Silas's fingers intertwined with hers. Equals, he agreed. I like the sound of that. In the months that followed, news of the Zephyra Freedom Alliance spread across the galaxy. The transformation wasn't smooth or immediate. Centuries of entrenched practices and beliefs couldn't be changed overnight. There were rebellions and counter-rebellions, political maneuverings and assassination attempts. But the alliance held firm, growing stronger as more voices joined their cause. The Commission's work proceeded methodically, establishing legal frameworks for transitioning slaves to citizen status, creating economic support systems, and developing educational programs. Emperor Vorak, to everyone's surprise, proved a staunch ally once he had committed to the path of reform. Perhaps he recognized that the empire had to evolve or face eventual collapse from within. Perhaps he simply respected the law too much to ignore its implications once they had been properly presented. Or perhaps, as some whispered, he had been waiting for an opportunity to make these changes without appearing weak. A year after the fateful Centennial trial, Silas stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city of Nexus Prime. Lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, stretching to the horizon in every direction. Thinking about the arena, Tiessa asked, joining him at the railing. Sometimes I still dream about it, he admitted. 100 days of fighting, never knowing if each would be my last. And now? Now I fight different battles, less blood, but sometimes more frustrating. He smiled slightly, though having you beside me makes even the most tedious negotiation bearable. Tiessa leaned against him. Do you ever regret it? Refusing the traditional rewards that day? Your life would have been much simpler if you'd just accepted safe passage to some distant world. Silas turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Not for a moment. I chose freedom, and in doing so, I found something even more valuable. What's that? Purpose, he said. And you? Below them, the city continued its evening routines, millions of lives proceeding in new directions. Former slaves now walked as citizens, their status protected by laws that continued to evolve. The work was far from complete, but a foundation had been laid that could never be entirely dismantled. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Silas said. Not as the Centennial Champion to a princess, but as one person to another. Tiessa's eyes widened as he knelt before her, not in subservience, but in the ancient earth tradition she had learned about during their many cultural exchanges. Tiessa of Zephyra, he said formally. Would you choose to bind your life to mine, not by law or tradition or obligation, but by love and free choice? Tears sparkled in her golden eyes. I've been yours since I watched you fight that 100th battle, she whispered, and I will let no one else claim either of us, ever again. Their kiss sealed a promise more binding than any imperial decree. more revolutionary than any rebellion. In a galaxy where people had been treated as property for millennia. Two individuals chose each other as equals, and in doing so, showed countless others that a different way was possible. The news of their union spread across the stars, a simple story that carried within it the seed of transformation. She had watched him fight 100 warriors alone, and now she would never let anyone else touch him, nor would he allow anyone to claim her as merely a prize to be won. They belonged to themselves, and to each other by choice. And in time, that choice would change everything.